So welcome to what's sort of been the third, I guess we would call it the series of Meet the Director events for this year. Um, the thing I always try and be clear, because I'm always a little uncomfortable even with the Meet the Director kind of names of these. These events are really not at all about meeting me, right? These are just about trying to communicate what the program's about, trying to really make sure we can be as transparent about what we are, what we offer, and try and give information to you as best as possible, right? For those who might have attended some of the prior ones, you know that the sequence that we've sort of done so far is in the first one, we had a discussion really on kind of who fits the program. The last one that we did was really sort of answering the question that we think many people would have of, wait a second, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, why pursue an academic program, right? Why a 2-year commitment to an academic program for entrepreneurship, right? And today we really want to talk a bit about, how does a program like this really incorporate the practical application, right? And these are all geared, if you've done some research on the program, heard me talk, heard most anybody talk, it's really geared towards this idea that our program is really built on these three pillars of academic insight, practical application, and the peer and community engagement, right? And the fact that what makes our program, what we believe makes it really special, is fitting all these together, right? That we want people that aren't looking for just one of these pillars or one thing. We're not a program that it's there's 3 things we offer, pick one, pick 2. We really want people that want everything. As in prior webinars, and you heard me welcome and thank them at the beginning. We're really fortunate to have students and team members on the webinar today. So I'll sort of go through my spiel of this, and then please, the idea is that we leave a bunch of time at the end for a Q&A. And again, if you've attended these or looked through the program, our students are really the special bit of the program, right? So a lot of the time, hearing me talk about it is one thing, but a lot of the questions that you have, in many cases, I like to defer to the students, and can answer a lot of the stuff really well, right? And can give you kind of, okay, well, this is what's really going on, right? So with that, let me sort of delve into the topic of today, right? So, today's really on practical application, but it's also with that, it's also kind of the complementarities. How does it fit with academics? How does it fit with peer and community engagement? And obviously in this, the first thing we need to do is say, well, what are we even including? What are we talking about when we talk about practical application, right? When I was putting this together, I don't know. So clearly I'm American on this. So there's someone who, Yogi Berra was a famous Yankees manager who always had some interesting and funny quotes. And one of the quotes he had was, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is, right? And it's one, when you think about entrepreneurship, this is really important, right? So when we're talking about practical application, and we're talking about you and what your ambitions are, your venture is, your business is, well, it's really important to apply this, right? And because we're a part-time program, this is, it's the practical application that really makes the academic bit work and be special for the entrepreneurship program, right? It allows you the flexibility to, in parallel, take in some academic content, have discussions with your peers, and then you have this benefit of some recency effect of, okay, those things are bouncing around in your head while you're going about your actual daily job. It's hard for you not to sort of try and figure out, how does this apply to what's going on? And likewise, when you're going through the academic content, you're kind of thinking about some of the challenges that you're working on, your ambitions, where you're trying to go. And this is going to inform the academic content, right? So this is one of the parts of, we hear lots of learning by doing, right? But here it's learning by doing partly because of the part-time nature. You are working on your venture and you are trying to achieve your goals and objectives. And so this just really helps, right? The alternative of sort of this sequential manner where you're going to learn all the content, and then when you're done with that, then you're going to go and try and apply it. It's really hard to do that retain all that knowledge, try and remember it, and then later apply it. Even though we always think, right? We always think, oh, I'll be able to do that, or I've got that, right? But it's just always harder. One of the things that we get in a lot of the courses, and actually we're about to transition next week. Our first year students have their second residential, and we start to transition into elective courses. One of the courses I'll be teaching is a growth course, which if I take that course as that module as an example, it's one where we're throughout the whole module, the unit of analysis that we're asking students to work on is their venture, their idea, their business in its current form, right? Their initiative, what they're trying to do. And so that type of a module is one where no. It's when we talk about it and we talk about a case study, or we put the theory up there, or we talk about examples, it's always so much easier to apply it to someone else's than it is to our own, right? Even apparently simple questions, right? So if you ask someone, what's the core trade-off between this or that? Oh, well, it's easy. It's cost and quality. And they're like, what's the core trade-off in your business? Well, it's this. Well, is it? Right? So it always just gets a little tougher when it's your own, right? So this is, at the core of it, it's harder on your own. It's always, the hardest part of learning is to transfer learning from one context to another, right? To be able to transfer that, it might seem trivial, and we probably pay a little, always think it's easier. We always have that little bit of overconfidence. Oh, I'll be able to do that. But the ability to constantly try to apply it while you're learning it, beyond surfacing some challenges in areas where we didn't quite understand, and we have the opportunity because we're in the course to actually follow up on it. It also just makes things more salient, and the retention ends up just being that much better, right? So, this is about practical application, but the practical application, this is the reason we kind of say it's not just, 3 pillars, pick 1 or 2. The practical application just reinforces everything else, and everything else reinforces the practical application, right? But, the other part is practical application is not just us kind of saying, okay, here's the theory and throwing you out there and now figure it out, right? We do facilitate this, right? So every student gets a mentor. In addition to, the academic courses and content and the peer, we have, a number of industry seminars, right? So we adapt the industry seminars we do our best to adapt the industry seminars to the cohort that we have, right? So we try to make sure that we have people who cut across all the interests of the cohort. So whether that's from fintech to agritech to whatever it is, we try and bring people in to conduct these seminars, right? And that's another opportunity where it's not, you're listening to someone else, not on your venture, but you're hearing, what did they do? What did they actually do in practice? And what are their challenges that they're facing? And what are their views? And then you try and reconcile that with what you're learning in the program, right? And with your own venture and your own ambitions. And it just is another opportunity for all of the dialogue to happen among the cohort, right? Naturally, we also have, one of the real cores of the whole course is we have a community, right? not just your own cohort. And obviously your cohort is who you'll be most familiar with at first. But over time, from that cohort, there's usually the next one that you're, closest to. So like today we have first year and second year members of the community. But then, we have the growing alumni base of the program, and a number of even the industry seminars and activities, we invite people from other cohorts to come back to. So the community, the growing community, is a community that has faced, or will face some of the challenges that you're facing, or people, within our cohorts are facing. So it's one where you're trying to apply things, you're trying to figure it out, but you're not alone, right? And this is, for many, this is really helpful, right? It's and even just the knowledge that other people are struggling in similar manner that you are, right? It's not easy, right? And sometimes, especially when we see the truncated stories of everyone else's success and this, we don't always see all the struggle that everyone goes through, and it is just a struggle, right? And it's sometimes nice to know that other people are working at this, and you're not alone, right? And people are feeling the same thing. So this is another part. So this the first year of the program is primarily it's very structured, and it's much more intensive in terms of structured courses. All the core courses and electives happen in the first year of the program. The second year of the program really shifts, it's sort of, we call it the major project, right? The master's thesis. It is in the academic program. That the second year is much less structured, right? But this is the time to dig into some area of your business, your venture, your entrepreneurial journey, some area, whether it's just overall entrepreneurial ambitions, whatever the focus is, where you want to dig deep and try and understand something, right? So there's some aspect that you feel there's a gap in your knowledge or the knowledge that's out there, right? So if this is, if it's your venture, it's probably there's some element of your business model. It could be an assumption where actually you're not quite sure you've tested that assumption. It could be an opportunity. It could be the underlying driver of value. There's something there which if you knew more about it, would provide you the ability to push forward. We ask, students have a wide berth in terms of what the specific topic is, but across all of them, then you're going to dig deep into this to understand, okay, what has been studied here, right? What frameworks that we've learned so far can we apply? Where do I need to dig a little bit deeper and get some more research? What do I need to look in? What are other mechanisms? What's similar? And the key here is, it's not to say you couldn't do this outside the program, right? But we're always going to push you on the major project, on the thesis. You're going to dig into something deeper than you would have. Generally, I would say you're going to dig deeper than would be otherwise economically feasible, right? So if you were just in your business, you'll dig it deep to some point, but then at that point, there's something else that that needs your attention, and you're going to shift gears. And we want you to research it this way, not just because we're Cambridge and we want, this academic rigor, but it provides a deeper level of understanding. And once you get to some level where, okay, then we normally move on. Once you sort of push through that and really get clarity of what's going on, now for whatever application, whatever it is you're trying to do, you get that much more understanding, right? So it helps you then get the confidence to either go after the opportunity or pivot to something else. And in the second year, we have, obviously, the mentorship stays the same, the industry seminars stay the same, all this stays, but then we also have an academic supervisor who comes on. It's much less structured, and this is really, it's a definite shift, but now is when you really get to go after something and put together a body of work that can help you move things forward. Now, one thing in in many interviews, and I think I usually start off a lot of them by saying, like, the match is most important for us, right? We want the right students for the program. We want students that want to be here for the right reason. And we would never claim that we're the only, that if you don't pursue our program, you can't be a successful entrepreneur. Of course not, right? Of course not. And even, the counter argument to this would say, like, all right, but do I need a master's program there's lots of other alternatives, right? I could take the money that I'm going to put in the master's program and invest it in my idea, or invest it in my startup, or invest it in whatever initiative I'm working on in business. At the end of the day, that's learning by doing, right? So here, you could push back at me saying, like, Jeremy, you're saying learning by doing. The real learning by doing is just putting money in the venture. You could attend meetups, right? You could find here at Cambridge, we have venture creation weekends through the Entrepreneurship Center. You could go to hackathons, right? You could you can even find a mentor for yourself, right? Again, down the road, we have, Cambridge Makespace, and they have, drop-in sessions, and you can have discussions this way. Like, you could gather data and conduct research on your own, right? So, you could piece this together. And this is the point where you're like, okay, why are you pushing us away? But the point is, we want to make sure that you understand all these options are out there. Let's understand the trade-offs in that, right? So why might we not want to do that, right? The idea is you could get all those pieces, right? And I'd argue you could probably get all those pieces for less than it would cost to come to the program, right? But what's missing? That's, the real question is what's missing, right? So why would you want to do that? And this is what I think is really important, right? And it's, one part is it's really the glue that holds all the pieces together, right? It's the glue that holds them together. And also it's one where you can get all those pieces, but the pieces might not necessarily really fit together. Right? So I'm getting one piece from one place, another piece from another place, and I'm responsible now for trying to curate it. But now I have to try and make sense of all of these. And you could argue, well, there's also a benefit I get if I have all these pieces. There's a different community in each one of these, and I get to meet many, many more people. And that could be true. You might meet more people. But the common experience among those people, right? So within our cohort, what makes a lot of this work is everyone in the cohort is going through the same modules, has the same cadence. Everyone has their own stuff happening outside of the program. But we start to get this common experience, right? And this starts to build a bond. It creates familiarity, right? And this is going to create a common language. So if you see something, you're working on something, there is a challenge, you can speak about it in the same way. You'll use the same terminology from different modules. You will have seen certain things. You can use similar analogies, right? This enables the learning and the understanding and the cohesiveness. And it starts to build trust, right? And it builds trust and caring. And one of the things, we often talk about amongst the cohort, and I talk about with prospective students as well, is, we think we want people who don't just care about what they're doing, but they want to try and help each other, right? They view each other as assets, and we want to try and learn together. And this is one where we're going to actually be able to disagree with one another, right? So if I have on here from Adam Grant, if anyone's looked, the recent book Rethinking, right? He has this rethinking hierarchy, the hierarchy of rethinking styles. And one of the things he talks about a lot is the need to surround ourselves with people who will disagree with us, right? The need for people to challenge us, right? The idea that disagreement isn't necessarily negative, right? The idea that if people are disagreeing with you and arguing with you, actually that's because they care enough about what you're doing to try and convince you to do something else, right? If you're just sort of interacting with people on a surface level and I'll drop in here, I'll drop in there, and it's not some, deeper engagement, are you really going to, are they really going to exert the effort to try and say, wait a second, Jeremy, I don't think that's the right idea, right? And so this is a big part when you have all of these different pieces. When the mentors aren't there just for one time, they're part of the program. If you want, we talk about very often in terms of relational contracts, right? Relational contracts are things that happen for the long term, because you're doing things over trust and built for a long-term relationship, not just for a single instance, right? This is important. This is because the mentors too are there to say, wait a second, that might not be the way to go. They're there to question you and challenge you. So a big benefit of this is that we can get disagreement, right? But we can get disagreement, the quote, disagreement without being disagreeable, right? Without having, we want to try and challenge each other. And through that challenge, we can all benefit, right? And this doesn't happen so easy when you just self-curate pieces, right? It takes time to kind of put that together. The trade-off is, sure, if your goal is just to have a huge network and try and touch as many people as possible, then touching into all sorts of different networks might work. But it's one of, if you want to build, deeper relationships and have sort of this common experience where you can get that real help and assistance, that takes a little bit more, right? I think there's also something that the self-curation aspect, we probably don't give enough attention to, right? And I'll say it's one where, for anyone out there who's an athlete, for that matter, anyone who's a parent, anyone who's trying to get people to do things, there's I always look at this as any sports. So I've been involved in sports for quite a while. I'm by no means an elite athlete, right? But I've been on the receiving side, and I've been on the coaching and managing side of from cycling to running now, is, I try anyway. And the key idea on the athletics bit is everyone always wants to work their strengths, right? The sprinter doesn't want to go for a long run, right? No one who's running wants to really stretch, right? Nobody wants to work on what they don't really like doing. You always want to work on your strengths. You want to work on what you enjoy, and you want to build that up. And you discount that, I do enough stretching, it'll be okay, right? Or I don't, you do a little bit and you feel like, okay, check the box, I'm done, right? And one of the problems in the self-curation is you're choosing what you think you need, right? But you tend to discount what you don't really know, and what you don't really know that you need, right? And that's kind of a big deal, right? So there's quite a big benefit, right, to having some of it curated and then allowing choice, right? So there's sometimes when we need to do some of the things we might not have chosen on our own, right? We're gonna kind of, otherwise we can keep going down this one path, and we will reinforce our strengths, but it's actually the weaknesses that might be holding us back, right? There's so many analogies to this, right? There's athletics. There's an old story. It gets used in many an innovation course of this gunfire at sea analogy of the warships with cannons on their side, and everyone. And it's interesting if you look at a table of the advancement of technology of early ships, and it's one where I usually put this table up, and you can see every year that, the ability to have projectiles that could penetrate thicker steel. Every year they could penetrate a little bit thicker steel, and every year every ship would be built with a little bit thicker steel, right? So the idea was we can shoot bigger arm and protect ourselves more and shoot more. But what everyone was kind of not paying attention to was these were cannons on ships on the ocean that were rocking back and forth. And at the end of the day, something like, I think in the 3% of the cannons actually fired actually hit the other ship, right? So it's one of these things where the safest place to be was on the ship that was being shot at, right? No one was actually paying attention to the weakness. Everyone just kept building better projectiles and thicker armored ships, and not focusing on the fact that, wait a second, maybe we need to figure out a way to aim and to actually keep the guns steady, right? So, I mean, you can see this time and time again, the focus on, you can call it status quo, you can call it strengths, but not paying attention to our blind spots, right? And this, again, a big part of what we try and do is try and point out the blind spots and try and help you attend to the blind spots. On this, something I try to do in these webinars, and I'll try and do it again today, is lay out try and lay out what we do, why we think it's the right way to do it, but also make sure that everyone goes in eyes wide open, right? So, okay, given this, what does it take, right? And I think it's really important that the program, we have all these pieces, we have the structure, we do a lot to facilitate the practical application, but none of this is going to happen unless you make it happen, right? So at the end of the day, the most important thing is, learning by doing requires that doing bit, right? This is, again, part of the reason of trying to put the webinars together in this sequence that we have of talking about. I talked a lot in the who bit of, we want people who are willing to take the initiative, are going to put themselves out there. And, again, it might sound like a tautology to say learning by doing, doing requires you to do, of course, but it's not something where you can get this benefit of learning by doing just by attending and being present. It takes that extra work, right? And even that doesn't fully reveal the picture, right? Because if when we speak about working our weaknesses, it's a key to recognize that this means making yourself vulnerable, right? This means putting yourself out there, being willing to go after something and prepared to not succeed at that, right? So it might not work. It means putting yourself out there. I'm going to try and do this. I may be wrong. It means putting yourself out there so others can challenge you, right? And these are really important to get outside your comfort zone, right? But at the end of the day, those are the bits that really, really allow kind of the power of learning by doing. If you're taking the content that's being offered, if you're taking the suggestions of others, and then you're trying to do it, and then whether it works or not, and then having this feedback loop from this is where the real power of the program kind of emerges. And this is also what sort of cements the learning and makes it salient for the long term, right? Now, on that, I think it's important to acknowledge the last bullet point, right? Which is, as the two cohorts of students that we have joining us on today, can attest to, right? In one case, it's our second year's cohort entered prior to the pandemic, right? And never saw any of this. And, it's one where they came in September of 2019, and then they haven't been able to set foot in Cambridge since, right? So it's done completely online. Our cohort that just started in 2020, some of them were here. They came in the midst of this, but the large number haven't met each other yet, right? And next week's the residential, but that's somewhat quasi-residential. Obviously, it's online, right? So it's an online residential, which little bit of an oxymoron there, right? But this does make it tougher, right? And it's one. This is important to acknowledge, but it doesn't negate anything that we've talked about thus far, right? So everything is still, you still have to do the all of the benefit comes about, you still put yourself out there, you still have all of the components. The fundamentals remain the same. We have to adapt our expectations on some of this, right? We have to adapt our expectations on how easily it is to coordinate and communicate, and it takes a little bit more time in terms of the familiarity, and it's more difficult, but everything, it doesn't invalidate anything, right? Everything else, it's still possible. We just have to recondition it on the context that we're within. With that, you don't want me just to, I hope you don't want me just to ramble on for an hour, right? So the idea of this is, let's to shift gears now. We have the student ambassadors from the program. We have Anino, Aaron, and Mauzi, and they can answer many questions, or even if you don't direct them towards, I might delegate them for the students to answer instead of myself. And then we have Kirsten and Lara from the program who can answer some of the programmatic questions. And obviously I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the program. So does anyone have any thoughts, comments, reflections?
I've just got a very quick comment, Jeremy. I just want to say that we're recording the session, but we will edit out anyone so that people can't be identified afterwards. But if you don't want to be seen at all, you can also put your question in the chat. But feel free to speak to us and to our students and Jeremy if you want to.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I'm always forget that. Felipe, you have your hand up, all right?
Yeah. Hi. How are you?
Okay,
nice to meet you. I was just wondering how the program can help us to, let's say, develop ideas that are already working, kind of, but how can we create companies or organizations that have certain corporate feel, or start building up something that started, like it's a startup, let's say, it's already there, it's expanding fast. How can the program help us get there, becoming like a serious company, becoming something bigger? That's my question.
So I think there's actually a couple questions embedded in that. One, because the first one started sort of how can we adapt ideas into businesses. The other one is how, so it's sort of phases, right? All of these are how do we go from where we are and progress, right? So whether it's from an idea into a startup, or whether it's from a venture that's starting to get some sales, and how do we actually not just bleed money and get to the point where we're a viable business, right? The short answer doesn't happen overnight, right? But this is one where we piece together we have all of the pieces that help you get from A to B, right? So help you understand what it is that's lacking. Also, even help you get a better idea of what are realistic expectations, right? Now, you have this comes, there isn't one recipe there's not one recipe for anybody or any venture. There's not even one, I'd say, journey that everybody follows, right? So I think the important part is the number of different sources that you do have to draw upon, whether this is another student in the cohort, right? Whether this is your mentor, the spark is going to come from somewhere, and there's a lot of people to ask questions of, right? So, the one person who's just absolutely dedicated to trying to help you, your mentor's objective is to try and help you. I would even say try and question you on a lot of assumptions of your business, right? So the mentor might not be, in many cases, hasn't run the business that you're seeking to run, might not be even in an exact industry. We try to pair them on someone that is complementary and can ask you questions and help you along. But then it's one where it is a journey. So it's not, going to happen in a week. It's in the first year, there's a number of courses that, my hope, I'll see if the students can answer this better than I can. The hope is that bit helps to get some clarity. And then we try and provide a number of touch points. Next week is going to be a big one where the students get to, all have scheduled their time so they can, interact more than they could during the time in between. And this is a time where we try and have, right now it'll be sort of even virtual coffee chats where people can talk about things, and we try and have other, even in industry seminars, if there's the common experience, if you were there, you can talk about issues you're facing. And all of this helps you get from, find out what it is that's lacking. In some cases, it's, we have students who have found their founders, right? So have found a founding team. Ventures have been created through the program, right? That people came, met each other, and then now they launched a venture. Or people have come on the program and realized someone on the program actually, this is a gap and you complement this, and they've joined forces. In other cases, it's just trying, people are further along and they're trying to figure out what direction to take, and you get some clarity through it. So hopefully that's somewhat, it's not really a concrete answer, but I'd rather say we have all the components that help to offer that. I'm not sure if Aaron or anyone.
Jeremy, we've got
Yep.
a question from Ruth actually, who can't raise her electronic hand. So if
That's fine.
Great, thank you so much, Kirsten, and thank you so much, Jeremy. I wanted to check that what your definition of the venture was, because if the definition of the venture in this program is only a high scale, fast scale startup in the kind of guise of Netflix, Bumble, going to IPO, then this would be a badly aligned program for me to consider. I'm very interested in female entrepreneurship, especially large digital businesses with low overheads and low staff numbers, but they don't aspire to become the market, dominator. So I just wanted to check, when you're talking about venture, can the students' venture be a business of any flavor, or does it have to be a startup in the traditional sense?
So my short answer to this is one where I'd like to give the opportunity even to have the students even talk very quickly about what it is they're working on, because that'll provide even a little bit more richness. Than the short answer is it can be a breadth of everything from people who have tried things and want to have a startup to just have ideas to all sorts of ventures. Some people who don't have a venture but are working within a large corporate and are trying to figure out how to apply entrepreneurial principles within their business, right? Great. We have, so we'd actually take the opposite approach and say we pride ourselves on not focusing on, any one type of venture. Mm-hmm. What we want is people that are unique, all focused on the practice of entrepreneurship, which can be applied very broadly. With that, I'd love to, given Aaron and Mausi a chance to chime in on this, though.
Sure, Jeremy. Hi, everybody. My name is Anino Emua. I am in the cohort, which is hopefully graduating this year, in the second year. And I'm a strategy and financial advisor based in France. I have a business there, and I'm also launching a venture which has to do with female entrepreneurship. But just before I add to Ruth's question, I'd like to go back to the first question, which really I think is very important to say. And that is to say that there's a diversity of businesses here at different levels. And whether you're scaling up or whether you've been in it for years, I think it really doesn't matter. We have a really active ecosystem, and even on the academic side, some of the lecturers have actually launched successfully and have led very, very successful ventures. So you do have all that expertise at your fingertips. There's also, in our cohort, talking about female entrepreneurship, 2 of our female entrepreneurs have just won certain innovation competitions. And interestingly, and this is my little pitch, one of them actually, and this answers the 2 questions, I'm actually on the advisory board of, and one of them actually found a co-founder on the course. So it is an amazing community. And I think the academic side of it really gives you a solid grounding, but it's, in addition, you have access to lecturers who have done it. You also have access to founders, and it gives you a visibility as well for those of you who are looking to raise funding at whatever level you are at.
Thank you, Anina. Erin, Mauzi, I don't know if either of you want. Yeah.
Sure, I would echo Anino, and yeah, I think, right, there are so many different structures of businesses involved in the cohort, and getting to know their structure will help you also look at how you're doing things. So I did come in with a business that was already built, but I knew there were so many different opportunities that I needed to analyze, and I needed a way to systematically analyze them and figure out, what is going to be the right path for growth and forward moving and scaling and all these different things. And by having accountability to the academic side and to my classmates, it really has helped me make sure that I am moving forward. And at least if I can't make it's not going to happen tomorrow, next week, I'm not going to make any, drastic changes to my business, but I am, writing notes constantly and ready to act and move based on all of it.
Thank you. Mauzi? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. And thanks to Ruth for the question. So my background is I came to do the course with my own small business. And I was running for 2 years, and now the business in its 4th year now. So it's more of a lifestyle business at this stage. So I only have 3 full-time staff, and I have like a couple of part-time staff and a few like external consultants working for me. But I do plan, and I hope one day I can actually launch the business further and to conquer the world one day. So really, I think the course is for people in every stage of their own business venture, and they want to develop their business and to find the way to grow their business.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. There's been some, I think, questions in terms of application questions. We can probably get those, if there's details of applications, I don't know, Kirsten.
Yeah, please. If you've got any specific questions about the application process, just send them to our email address, which is mstentrepreneurship@jbs.com.co.uk. And we've also got a video on the application process. So if you want to view that, I will put a link at the bottom in just a moment. Oh, yes, and I actually said the wrong email address. Thank you so much, Laura.
Yes. And in terms of, there's a question on, applications from niche emerging industries. I mean, this is really one, echoing, what we said before, and what, Anino and the examples from Erin and Mauzi. We're not concerned about what the idea or the business is, that we don't restrict ourselves on that. So, please, no one should feel that, your business or your idea is not good enough to come on the course. That's not that's not the criteria at all for selection on the course. That's especially, you know, if it's something early stages, the chances that it's going to be the same thing by the time you leave the course as it was when it entered, it's most likely it's not going to be the same, right? So things adapt, pivot, change so much that you know, if we selected on what people's ideas were, that would be that's not a good strategy. Question, Manlio, I think.
Hey, hi. So just to give you some context, I mean, on my end, I'm an old school, like, high yield bond trader by training, and half a year ago, I basically took the leap. A friend of mine started a business about 3 years ago in the fintech space, and he offered me the role as CFO. I took the leap, I jumped in, and since then, I mean, it's been an eye opener, the best thing I've ever done in the past 5 years for sure. Leaving that dinosaur industry and getting to really do a lot of the exploration and figuring things out. And that's what you said really resonated with me, with where I think one of the bigger problems is, yeah, having that academic rigor to kind of really dig into what's going on there and come up with analytical solutions, because in the end, it's an iteration problem more than anything else, right? And it's super tough to piece that together. I wouldn't know how to do it, you know? But so what I'm doing, or what I'm experiencing now every day, is that there's a lot of learning going on between me and my founder, right? So for people like me who are not like running their own business, but are intrapreneurs, right, in a very small team, how does that marry then with the mentoring going on with a mentor that will come in from Cambridge, right? How does that work? Because obviously a big part, you know, of the process working out for me is that I convince my boss, right, that it's a good idea to be involved and get that knowledge transfer, right?
Yeah. So great question, and this is on the basis of, it's like, wait a second, you're saying it applies to everything, but how can it actually? How does it really work, right? And I think you're talking how would it work on the mentoring, right? And I think the mentoring one is. We have mentors, you know, not all the mentors actually are, you know, many of the mentors help entrepreneurs. Many of the mentors also help lots of large corporates, right? So there's mentors with quite a bit of experience on there. I mean, it's one where, you know, if you want to get an idea, on our webpage, we do have a listing of the current mentors that we have, and you can look at some of the backgrounds. We have people who actually do that that's a lot of what they do, is trying to help large corporates understand direction. But I think it's also one of saying, if you're trying to, on this course, figure out, okay, how can I apply some of the entrepreneurial thinking, right? So how can I use this analysis? And it's one where, you know, we had a faculty member on the course who used to say, you know, how entrepreneurship sort of lives in the shadows of corporate innovation, if you think of it, right? Many of the same fundamentals, a lot of the mechanisms, the drivers, they're not, you know, from an academic standpoint, the fundamentals aren't that different of whether you're talking about, you know, an entrepreneurship context or a large corporate. The constraints change a lot, right? So whether or not you have the same finances, whether or not time matters, how tied you are to a certain organizational structure, right? So if you talk about a much more established financial institution versus a smaller fintech, and the ability to, you know, have more rigid structures and go after things and be more agile or flexible, these things change, right? So all of those it's sort of this spectrum of, yes, you have the entrepreneur who early on you're just trying to find what is the business and venture that sticks, right? So can I find what this is? Once I find that, I need to figure out how to make it work. How can I kind of, you know, scale, not just scale in terms of getting bigger, but scale in terms of how do I actually not just go from 0 to 1, but make one repeatable, right? Go from 1 to N of these, right? That's a type of scale that you need to achieve too. And do I just make, you know, a number of these, or do I try something else? Those are all decisions that, well, yeah, corporates face those in different contexts, right? So the environment, the contextual surroundings change. A lot of the fundamentals are the same, right?
Right.
So I think what makes the what makes the course an entrepreneurship course, we're all looking at it through the context of an entrepreneur, right? So whether you're coming from a corporate or whether you're coming from a, an established business, or whether you're, the bulk of the students, the bulk of the people, and the bulk of how we're approaching it is from the entrepreneurial context, right? So we're not generally addressing the issue, a big challenge in a large corporate is saying, okay, I have this structure, I have this strategy over top me, I want to do that, but that doesn't fit the organization. How am I going to make that, happen? That's a little bit different, right? So these are all differences, but the fundamentals are there. Hopefully that, the mentors, these are ones where we have people that are a little more in tune to people who are just trying to find a startup, right? So who have ideas and are trying to make it work. And we have people who are a little more attuned to, okay, you're in a large corporate, can we try and figure these things out, right? And then this isn't just the academic content and the mentor. This also should happen through it's on the order of 60 different industry workshops and webinar, that we have. It's a lot, right?
Right.
And those are all opportunities to talk to people who are, potentially going through similar things or have done them, or to get their input, right? So it's just trying to enable a lot of these touch points to figure out, okay, how do I go forward, right? Is that
Perfect.
hopefully I addressed that somewhat, right?
Absolutely.
Great. EYK, apologies for.
Hello, my name is Eric. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I didn't change my English name. Actually, I have a quick question. I recently read a book. It is published by Harvard Business Review. It is talking about the entrepreneurship through acquisition. So once, if I have a chance to study this program, can I learn more about acquiring an existing business? It is because based on the book, it said maybe it has a business model. It is much safer or easier for the entrepreneurs to run or scale up the company rather than establish the company by your own from 0 to 1. So maybe I'm thinking to do in this way. So is it possible or is it allowed?
Yeah. So you will have picked up on the right language to use that my wife always uses. Is it possible? Yes. I have a hard time telling you it's not possible, right? I tell you that's one of, she'll always, Jeremy, is this possible? Oh, yes, it's possible, right? Is it something I want? No. So is it possible? Yes, it's possible, right? So I think it's one where now, would I tell you that that's the right thing to do? Or I don't know, right? It's one that depends on you. I would say that, whether you're acquiring a company, starting it from scratch, as you said, if you acquire it, your idea would be to acquire a company at a certain scale and to be able to grow it and scale it. Well, you still need you need to know the same things.
Yes.
It's one where that's just saying I would like to acquire a venture at some that, I don't want to start it up from scratch. I don't feel, right now your belief is that that's not your core capability to start it from scratch. You believe that it would be your capability to take something, that's been started and scale it. Yes, that's possible. And yes, a lot of the fundamentals apply, right? Because we have people that have businesses that are trying to scale and grow and get this way. So yes, it's definitely possible. And could could that fit for you? Yes, it could, right? You're the only, you know the answer to that question best though, right?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. It's Dennis, I think.
Hi, Jeremy, and hi, everyone. So I noticed that a lot of students from this program actually comes from all over the world, and they are going to bring the knowledge they learned during the course back to their own country and their own market. So my question is, how does this program actually adapt to the global market, or markets from these other countries other than the UK or Western market or US market? Yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Thanks. And also I want to put out there to Nino, Aaron, and Mauzi, please, please interject at any time you want, right? So people don't just have to listen to me if you want. You don't have to, but I please interrupt me as much as you want. So you're right? The part-time nature of this is one where I think currently we have over 30 nationalities represented, right? Which is, phenomenal. I think it's one where, I touched on this in an earlier webinar, and I don't know if the stats are out there or not, but it's, we have all the different nationalities, we have the age ranges, the gender diversity, we want that diversity, right? Because that's, at the end of the day, all those different perspectives can, as we talked in today, can start to ask questions and raise some challenges, right? Now, is the question saying how do you translate that back to your own geography, or how do we tailor it to your particular geography?
Yeah, the main idea that it seems the global market varies from country to country. Actually, a lot of country or area, they have their own kind of style. For example, like China, they got a very rapidly developing internet companies. But it seems to be a little bit different from the other countries. So yes, just like I mentioned, I want to ask, the firstly is how our program in Cambridge University actually adapt to this kind of difference. And the secondly, how to bring that back to the original country of the student.
Yeah, so I think there's it's when we say, how do we adapt? It's one where I view it more as this is lots of different knowledge being sourced from all over through our students, right? So if we're trying, especially if you're talking the academic bits, you're talking about a certain context, right? Or certain fundamentals. But then the beauty of this, and we see this a lot, right? So the beauty of this is we'll have a student talking about, oh, we're trying to figure this out, and it's, we're figuring this in the future, maybe we'll be able to do this. And then, we have someone come, someone from China is like, in the future, wait a second, that's actually something we're doing right now. And let me tell you how it's done, right? And this gets shared. And you start saying like, okay, well, that's how it's done. Can we do that this way? Or why can't we do it this way? Or, if I even go historically on the program, early on, things were segmented much more by industry, right? So we have this, you could say, you have this, your question is really, there's a certain way of doing things in a region, but I could argue there's certain ways of doing things within industries too, right? Whether it's regulation, right? So regulation is regional, but you also have different regulations by industries. And in many cases, not all of this always makes sense of why it's done one way or another across geographies or across industries. But what's really powerful is when you get people from the different geographies, different industries, having this conversation of, well, this was the assumption that in the financial industry, we just do it this way because that's the way the regulation's always been. And then all of a sudden you get someone from, oil and gas industry, or someone in, some other, the food industry saying, wait a second, it's like that. This is how we do it in this industry. And it's making those connections. So there's a nice definition of innovation, right? It's the non-obvious connections between dissimilar things, right? So this is a really powerful way to think about innovation, right? So, and this is the way we come up with impactful and novel solutions, is making these non-obvious connections between dissimilar things. And so what you're talking about is there's dissimilar geographies who are approaching it differently, figuring out how to make the connections and what are the similarities and what are the differences, and understanding that deeply. That allows you a deeper level of understanding to then go back within your own geography and say, wait a second, is there a different way? Can I do this better, right? So it's not something, we won't do that for you, right? You know, something, again, I probably say too much, but it's really true, right? We as a program are not a program where we won't provide all the answers, right? If we do everything right, we'll enable you to ask better questions, right? So what we're really, really, really about is asking the really good question, right? Because if you ask the really good question, which is not easy at all, right? That's how you get to that's how you find what needs to be done. And so that's, you know, that is, yes, it's disparate countries and industries and there's all this diversity, but provided we get the right people who all want to listen and who all are interested in talking about, you know, the similarities and differences and how could we make things work, then we end up with a good learning at the end of it. Right?
And Jeremy, I'd like to add to that, and something which hasn't really been discussed here, also, I'm sorry, which is also important, and that is the research that you do in your second year. That is the perfect opportunity for you to delve really deeply into your industry, into your country, and to answer questions. And very often as entrepreneurs, we sort of think of, oh my goodness, research sounds too academic. It isn't actually. There is an academic underpinning, but it has to have applications in terms of your venture or in terms of what it is you're doing. And that is actually a perfect way to actually delve deeply into these local contexts.
Thank you, Anita. You can tell Anita's deep in this, right? So sorry, Erin. Yeah.
Oh, no. Yes, definitely. I was also just going to add, I think you will find with the professors on teaching the course, I've found it really is great. They will have case studies from the US, from Asia, from Europe, from all over. You can apply, you can find what is very similar to either your industry or your geography. You know, I learned all about sanitation, underground sanitation in Vietnam, and, you know, then Southwest Airlines in the United States, that, you know, so from all scopes of it, you can definitely, you know, have that knowledge and bring it back.
Yeah. I mean, it is one where it does get brought in from all the different angles. And I mean, this has been one of the small silver linings of the pandemic, right? We've been able to also get speakers that are more global in nature, right? So we can pull in people that aren't right here, that don't have to come in during a residential, and we've spread that out much more. So we definitely try and bring all the different perspectives in. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, trying to see if there was anything else.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for this session. My question is directed more to the current cohort. If you guys have to redo this program, what is it that you would do it differently?
Asking the tough question. There you go.
Well, I think, should I start as a student view? Yeah. I think if I were to restart my year one, I would definitely start to do my essays early on. I wouldn't wait until kind of quite late to do those like dissertations, you know. So yeah. So if you do join the course, do start your essays early on. And the course is actually quite intense for a part-time course. I find it's actually 4 terms, and we did like 4 modules last term, 3 modules this term, and 3 more modules next term, and so on. So that, like, we have to write 2,000 words essays for each of the course. So yeah, that's quite a lot of work.
I would also just add, I think you're going to get so much out of it. I think in the beginning, I overwhelmed myself too with all the things that I wanted to implement immediately, and actually attempting to do some of that. And I found myself very overwhelmed and feeling like, you know, I don't have time to do all of this, or how am I going to manage my time? All of those things. I mean, time management, of course, everybody can relate to that and feel that. But I think, you know, now it's realizing, I think as entrepreneurs, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves too, to feel like we must scale this business, we must go up, and it, you know, needs to have this 1 year, 2 year, 3 year turnaround and, you know, become something. So I think being a planner and having milestones along the way of the course has really helped me realize, like, okay, I'm not going to get overwhelmed, and I am going to try to implement these things and be methodical and be smart about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Erin.
I really must add to what my two shall I say, the two cohorts have said. We can't overemphasize that. And I know that on the first day, we had somebody from the cohort who was ahead of us who just told us there is so much work, right? And that was just the most excellent advice. And apart from a little bleep for myself with the personal family illness, I've been able to keep on top of it because I was prepared. So it's a lot of work. It's really rewarding. And the only regret I have is that somehow you feel that all that you have learned and all the resources that you have, somehow you just want to sort of keep them somewhere and just keep referring to them. And what I did do actually is that from some of my work, I did share some of the outcomes actually with the community as well. So if you are sort of good at sort of writing and blog posting and all of that, it's also an excellent way to sort of use some of the resources that you have acquired from the program as well.
And I think that it's a good question, and it's really good answers, and really, I mean, it's spot on. It's one of these things where it's a lot of work. And there's always also some of the fear of missing. There's so much happening. There's stuff that you want to get to. A little bit of trying to keep a good cadence, to keep good planning, and to be realistic, right? And the last one is probably the toughest one, right? To be realistic, because what is realistic? That's different for everybody, right? And that's just hard. That no matter what, that's hard. That's a great question. I think on that, Kristen, I think we're running out of time, but it's one of these where
we're running a little bit. I was going to say, normally Meet the Director events were in person at Judge Business School, and it was always really nice to have the sort of short introduction by Jeremy as to why we're meeting, on what the program is about, and then we would break out into the balcony area of Judge Business School, and
yes.
Some people would crowd around Jeremy, and others would speak to the students and alumni that would also turn up for these events, and we would all get far more opportunities to get our burning questions answered. I'm really sorry actually that I feel we haven't really heard enough from our students today. It's just not enough time, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but I'm so grateful that you came and spoke to our students and gave your views of how you're experiencing the program. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's one, there is, Kirsten can speak to it better than I can, but on the website there are ways to also speak to students there and to try and connect. If generally what happens is you leave this and then you realize there's a question that you meant to ask and you wish you could have heard it, but I forgot.
Yes, absolutely. So there's really two things. One of them is the student videos. We always get this question where people say, "Oh, am I right for the program? What are your students like? What kind of ventures do they do?" So about a year ago, we asked a couple of students, 7 actually of them, to just very briefly talk about their ventures, what made them set it up, and so on. Just literally talked freely, and we put it together into small videos. You can see those on our website. But also, if you have specific questions, we have got a chat feature where you can ask our student ambassadors directly any questions that are relating, especially to experience. So don't bother them with admissions related questions unless it's me. I'm on that platform as well. So if you want to ask any admissions questions, but if you want to ask, can I get my favorite type of pasta in Cambridge or whatever, they will tell you, as well as all the things about the program. So do feel free to speak to them.
Yes, and hopefully we'll get, we would do webinars, but it wasn't, you're making us reminisce about being, the Meet the Director. Yes. We long to get back in the building, right? Soon enough. Hopefully we're getting there. So with that, thank you all for attending. Thank you very much. And, Aaron and Mousy, this is, I really, really appreciate that. And stay in touch.